Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lions Grid. It is our Week 10 episode. We're fresh off that bye week for the Lions, and we are ready to go here. Joined today by Mr. Joseph Wilmot and Mr. Jeffrey Raymond. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Doing great.
I'm doing great, even though I am a little stiff, as the audience can see.
Just a little frozen there, but that's all good. Coming through nicely on the audio side of things. So, gentlemen, as always, it's 7:30 on a Thursday, which means it's time for the Lions Grid. Tonight's Thursday night football game. I dare say we might be a little more exciting of programming then because it is the Panthers taking on the Bears in what should be what we were just discussing, maybe one of the worst matchups of the year for Thursday night football. If you want to hang out with us here for the entirety of the show, we appreciate it. And of course, we're coming to you live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. Edward's already here; he's ready to go. And so, without further ado, we'll go ahead and kick things off like we always do, and we'll go ahead and grind the grid here and take a look back at what happened in Week 9 in the NFL. So, taking a look. If we go to the Thursday night matchup from last week, we had the Tennessee Titans traveling to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. The Steelers won that game 20-16. But Will Levis looked good in his second game as the starter for the Titans. Then played over in Germany, we had the Dolphins taking on the Chiefs. The Chiefs were the home team in Germany, and they got that win 21-14. Next, we had for the second year in a row, a QB was traded during the season, forced to play because of injury, and the Vikings, who were at Atlanta, get a 31-28 win with Josh Dobbs stepping in. The Bears, who are playing, of course, tonight, lost 17-24 against the Saints, although they did have 5 turnovers in that game, so just barely losing that game with 5 turnovers, that's something. The Rams were Matt Stafford-less as they took on the Green Bay Packers, and the Packers won that game easily, 20-3, ending their losing streak. The Commanders traveling to Foxborough, getting their first win at Gillette Stadium, 20-17, the final score there. Next, to help us feel better as Lions fans, the Seahawks traveled to Baltimore and found out that Baltimore is good as well. They lost 37-3, the final score there. So another first place team getting running through the buzzsaw that is the Baltimore Ravens. Then CJ Stroud getting a win at home against the Buccaneers, 39-37. The Browns shutting out the Arizona Cardinals, 27-0. The Colts traveled to Carolina and beat the Panthers 27-13. The Giants taking on the Raiders in the first game since Josh McDaniels has been replaced by Antonio Pierce as the head coach. And the Raiders getting a 30-6 win against the Giants, and Daniel Jones knocked out for the remainder of the season with a torn ACL. Then in one of the best games of the week, we had an NFC East matchup between the Cowboys and the Eagles, and the Eagles come out on top 28-23 in that game, even though it looked like there towards the end that the Cowboys were going to win. A good matchup in the AFC, we had the Bengals playing host to the Bills, and the Bengals got that win 24-18. And then finally on Monday night, we had the Chargers visiting the Jets, and the Chargers scored 27. The Jets offense only managed 6 points. Victory for the Chargers. And then, of course, there were 4 teams on bye, the Lions being one of them, and joined by the Broncos, the Jaguars, and the 49ers. So that's everything that happened in Week 9 of the NFL. As mentioned, Week 10 starts tonight with the Panthers traveling to Chicago. But, gentlemen, any of those outcomes from that game surprising to you? Jeffrey, anything catch your eye in those Week 9 games?
I wouldn't say surprising. I think, I guess the most would be the Commanders kind of going in. I know the Patriots are hurting right now, but this historic run that the Patriots have, it's ending with quite the whimper there, with a whole bunch of teams who've not gotten wins against them historically are starting to go into their dojo and starting to turn it around there.
In their own dojo. Joe, any games surprise you this past weekend?
No games really surprised me, but some things that are interesting is that we have a lot of backup quarterbacks now with starting roles in the NFL, and they're taking on other teams, and it's going to be difficult for more contenders for the Super Bowl to appear, especially when there's only like 2 to 3 good teams in each conference.
Yeah, I think for me, building off of that, Joe, I think for me the surprising thing is the Ravens. They've now beaten the Seahawks. They beat us a couple of weeks ago. Those are two teams that are sort of towards the top of the NFC. And to your point about there only being a few good teams in each division, it's really hard to get a gauge on how good the Ravens are. But they did just beat two of the better teams that are at least record wise in the NFC. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. And it's also been a little bit of it's hard to really get a good gauge on the season. Teams don't seem to be playing consistently from week to week. Like even the good teams, you see them play well one week, and then the next week they come out and they just play like they come out flat. And so it's really hard to tell, I feel, this season what to expect from teams. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And of course, with this being now the big push for the Lions coming out of their bye, I think there's certainly an opportunity for them to come out and make some statements here if they can do some good things here early on. But before we start talking about the Lions, let's do our buy or sell segment here. We'll go around and talk about some trending things from the NFL, and of course, some of those being the results from Week 9. So, one of the things, as mentioned, the team we'll start with is the Baltimore Ravens, and we'll get Jeffrey back in here when he comes back online. But one of the things that we were talking about is the Ravens and them being one of the better teams in the AFC. Gentlemen, are you buying or selling the fact that the Baltimore Ravens are currently, as of Week 10, the best team in the NFL? Joe, let's start with you and get your thoughts here.
It's going to be a buy for me. They've been beating pretty strong teams, and they've been beating them by big margins. They have a dominant defense. They have a playmaker at the quarterback position who can throw the football effectively. He can run the football effectively. They got people on run in the backfield. They got people at the wide receiver and tight end positions. That they're an all around complete team. They are the best team in the NFL right now.
And looks like Ed is sharing your opinion there as well, saying that the Ravens are starting to look like the team to beat. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here when it comes to the Ravens?
Yeah, this is a buy for me. I think they are peaking at hopefully not too early, but right now they are absolutely dominating here. Lamar Jackson's coming into MVP form, as we're going to talk about a little bit later. But yeah, they are absolutely the team to beat.
And I think that is a great point, is that they're sort of coming into form. One of the things that we're going to look for the Lions to do moving forward is, right, as the weeks go on, you want your team to be getting better and better. And so if the Ravens can continue to build upon what we've seen here through the first half of the season, certainly they could be definitely the front runner for the AFC in terms of what the Super Bowl race. So the good news for Lions is that the only way we'll see the Ravens again this season is if we do play them in the Super Bowl. So if we do find ourselves lucky enough to be in that position, we can worry about how to beat them then. Next up here, we have the Miami Dolphins. Are all flash and no substance. The reason for this particular point is that the Dolphins beat teams that are below 500 in terms of their record and lose to teams that are above 500. Joe, are you going to buy or sell the fact that the Dolphins are all flash with no substance?
I'm going to sell this. Most importantly, because they've shown that they can play really efficient games against these teams under 500. And just because they haven't beaten these teams above 500 doesn't mean that they can't stem together some good games further along down the season. Now, one might say that they can't compete against the the powerhouses in the AFC or the NFC. But I say anytime you put up 70 points, anytime you have Tua who's playing out of his zone, you have some really perennial players on the offense and defense, and they're a strong team. They're one of the best contenders in the AFC. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a sell for me. They're a good football team.
Jeff, what are your thoughts here? Are the Dolphins for real or are they pretenders? Are you buying or selling?
I'm going to sell this. I think their offense is really good. I agree with Joe that Tua is absolutely playing out of his mind, and when you're able to put up 70 points like that, it's kind of the proof's in the pudding here as far as their offensive production. I think their defense has a bit of a ways to go. They're definitely letting them down in that respect. But I think they're going to be able to stack some wins going forward, and we'll see if that defense can't get right by the playoffs.
Yeah, and then Ed chiming in here with he's selling as well. So the three of you guys are all on the same page. And also touching on the defense being a key for the second half of the season there for him, Jeffrey. So you guys are all mind melding around the Dolphins there. Very nice. Next up, we have sticking to the AFC. We have the Buffalo Bills. This next one is the Buffalo Bills have missed their. So this is actually a two-parter. In our show sheet, I combined two of these items together. But the Buffalo Bills have missed their window to make a run to the Super Bowl. Are you buying or selling that? And then would you say that Sean McDermott, even though the Bills are 5-4, should be added to our hot butts list for coaches on the hot seat? Jeffrey, let's start with you on this one.
I'm going to sell this, but they are very close here. I mean, their core is kind of they've been going at this with pretty much the same players. They added a few in free agency, and they were hoping that their wide receiver 2 can kind of complement Stephon Diggs. But I think their defense is all right. The problem for me is that when they switched kind of their offensive scheme, they really don't want Josh Allen to run the ball, and I've noticed that quite a bit. They don't want to put him in harm's way. But still, in several games this year, he's their leading rusher, which is kind of a problem. Defenses are going to be able to sit back, and he can't play hero ball necessarily with his legs, and they're making him air it out. And, you have to have a balanced attack to really succeed in this NFL, especially in a year where defenses are playing a lot better than offenses overall.
What's your vote for the hot seat? Should Sean McDermott be added to our hot butts list, or is he safe to stay off for now?
I think he is. I think he gets on there this week.
All right. Joe, what are your thoughts here?
I'm going to have to sell that they've missed their opportunity to make a Super Bowl run. I think that, it's still mid-season. As long as they finish strong, it matters what you do at the beginning of the season and halfway through the season. But, I mean, if they can put together a run like Detroit put together last year, Detroit was the hottest team in the NFL going into the playoffs and could have made a big difference if they were in the playoffs. Not that they would have made it very far, but just that they made it in there was a lot of hype. And that hype carried over into this season, and they started out 6-2. So I'm referring to the Buffalo Bills still having Josh Allen, still having key players that are not injured. I think that the Bills most certainly are still in the run for a Super Bowl title if they can get everything straightened out. As far as the head coach being on the hot seat, I can't say that's where he is right now, but he's trending close to being on there because this team was expected to be a big team going into this year and a Super Bowl contender. And if they fail to make the playoffs, or if they fail to do well in the playoffs, then yeah, I can see his job being in jeopardy.
And Edward chiming in here as well. He's going to buy on this one. He'll be a buyer. So he thinks that it's the coaching and the scheme. The offense has been stagnant. He agrees with a lot of what you were saying there, Jeffrey, about the need to open up Allen and giving him the option to run. He thinks there's going to be some changes coming to the organization. And he added on here a little too late to believe in position for the playoffs, and I see an early exit in the playoffs. So yeah, I mean, I think my big concern for the Bills in terms of their playoff window is again, Josh Allen's a little banged up. He's got that shoulder injury that he sustained from all the hits he's taken because he's been having to run the football and things like that. And you look at quarterbacks, similar quarterbacks like Cam Newton and Ben Roethlisberger, who later in their career they went from playing at a very high level to not being very good very quickly because of the injuries they were sustaining throughout their career. And I'm kind of worried that may be where Josh Allen is headed, that, he's been forced to run the ball so often and be such a physical presence in that offense that these injuries that he's been sustaining, not only this season, but in past seasons, those are going to catch up with him quickly. And if Josh Allen, if he does see a decline like we saw quickly with Cam Newton or Ben Roethlisberger, that could be the recipe for them really missing out on this playoff window and a chance to bring a Super Bowl home. Of course, unfortunately, just for like those other quarterbacks where they had to deal with Tom Brady, with Josh Allen, he's had to deal with not only Tom Brady in his career, but he's also had to deal with Patrick Mahomes. And so when you're dealing with some of the best QBs to ever play in the position, playing at the same time you are, it makes it it unfortunately makes it difficult no matter how good of a QB you are. So we'll have to see what the Bills can do. I do think they could make the playoffs, but I think I'm in the same position with Ed, where I think they might have a early playoff exit. And I think, we saw with the Lions in their ownership, just making the playoffs wasn't enough to keep a very good head coach in place here. They ultimately decided that just making the playoffs was not enough. They wanted to see better performance. And I think the Bills are kind of in that similar place where just making the playoffs year after year isn't enough. They really want to see them take that next step. So we'll see what happens. Something a little more optimistic, though, in terms of a team and their organization and their QB play. Gentlemen, are you buying or selling the fact that CJ Stroud just won the Offensive Rookie of the Year award with that performance against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? For record, he was the first quarterback in NFL history, rookie quarterback, with 400 plus passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions in a game. And of course, that happened this weekend against Tampa Bay. So, Joe, what are your thoughts here? Do you think CJ Stroud wrapped up the award with that performance?
No. One game does not define a season. The guy's been on and off, I think, for the first however many games of the season besides that one. And, he's a quarterback, he's a high pick, he's got all the opportunity in the world to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. But I don't think that that one game defines a season. And, there's still a lot of football to be played. I really like the Lions, Jahmyr Gibbs, and I like Sam Laporta. I think they played really good, and I think we're on a good team. They're on a good team this year. So we'll see them later on in the show, too, when I bring them up as far as the surprise segment. So, no, it's a sell for me. I don't think he's locked it up.
Very good. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here? Buying or selling CJ Stroud as Offensive Rookie of the Year?
I am going to sell this. I think he's currently a front runner because quarterbacks tend to get a lot of the flowers in these races. I do agree with Joe in that Jahmyr Gibbs leading the NFL in scrimmage yards and Laporta's having an amazing production for a tight end. Those are definitely up there for me. I think he, as far as the rookie quarterbacks, for me, he's clear and above the best as far as our first round picks are going. But who knows? Maybe the Mayo man, Will Levis, will come on strong in the second half of the season.
I'll be the token dissenter on this one then, and I'm going to buy. I think that was equivalent of his Heisman moment in the NFL to win this Rookie of the Year award. Going 71.4% completion percentage, 470 yards and 5 TDs in a day, and the fact that he led them down the field in that fourth quarter to get the win. I think that was, as long as he comes out and performs well, that is in the second half of the season. Like if he just drops off the face of the earth and gets injured or just plays really poorly, I think this will be the game that is sort of that feather in his cap when people look back for the voting time, and they'll be like, this was the moment that he came out and sort of put his stamp on things. But I'm the only person that feels that way, because Edward, he's not giving it away on the one performance, agreeing with Joe there. And we'll have to see. He only has one interception on the season so far, 14 touchdowns. So he's playing well, but I can't. I'm
Well,
not
with all
going
those stats, Kevin, I might want to change my opinion to a buy. I didn't know all that.
He's playing well, but I mean, your picks of Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta. I know we're Lions fans, so we're a little biased, but they are impressive numbers. So it's going to be a race. I think he's got some stiff competition, and it's exciting that some of that competition is wearing Lions jerseys for once. That is a exciting thing for us. So this next question here is aimed at the NFC East. And that is are you gentlemen going to buy or sell here that the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys will play each other 3 times this season? Of course, they're in the same division, so they're already playing each other twice during the regular season. For this to happen, they would need to meet again in the playoffs. Gentlemen, are you buying or selling that is what's going to happen this year? Jeffrey, let's start with you.
I'm selling this. I think the Cowboys, to me, I think they had a great chance here against the Eagles, but they fell short. I think they are going to continue to have some of these disappointing moments here. I think they'll end up making the playoffs, but I think they'll be out before they even get close to the Eagles.
Before they get close. Joe, what are your thoughts?
This is a buy for me. I think Dallas Cowboys have a good chance at beating Philadelphia the next time they meet up this season. And, they've only played once already, right?
Yep, they've only met once in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so I mean, the next game is at Dallas, and I really think that if Dallas wins that game, that Dallas sets themselves up. If Detroit gets the number 2 or number 3 seed, and Philadelphia gets number 1, all Dallas has to do is get the 4th or 5th seed, win their game, and not against Detroit. Maybe play Philadelphia in the second round if Philly gets the bye. It's very plausible. It's very possible. But I would say that Philadelphia and Dallas matchup in the playoffs would be a second round matchup after wild card into the division, and Detroit would hopefully be in the divisional round too after winning the wild card.
Yeah, it's interesting with the added wild card how things will work out. It is possible to not only will we see a collision between the Eagles and the Cowboys, not only is that a potential, but depending on what happens with the Minnesota Vikings in the NFC North, there is a potential that we could see the Vikings for a third time in the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. And Edward's going to join you here. He's going to say that he's going to buy. It's going to happen. The collision is inevitable, as Thanos would say. And Jeffrey, just for you, my dad's back, and he's here saying Detroit will not be in the division game.
A lot of silence while we're winning there.
And lose. Well, he's back with a passion now here for Week 10 coming out of the bye. He's relaxed, he's recharged, and he's ready to throw that Lions hate. So, speaking of hate, this next one is focused on the NFC South and them being the worst division in the NFL. I also paired this with the fact that another one of our items from the show sheet here, and that being that Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach Todd Bowles should be added to. So we have some different nominations here. We already nominated Sean McDermott, the Buffalo Bills head coach for the Hot Butts list. This next nomination is Todd Bowles, the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But if you look at the NFC South currently, the Saints are in first place at 5-4, but everybody else has a losing record. The Falcons are 4-5, the Buccaneers are 3-5, and the Panthers are 1-7. The Buccaneers have lost 4 in a row, which all started with that game against Detroit. Are you buying or selling the fact that the NFC South is the worst division in the NFL? Joe, let's start out with you here.
We see with the NFC South and the Carolina Panthers, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after they've played the Lions, they've gone on to have very poor seasons up to this point. So, I mean, the Lions get the victory against all three of those teams, and the majority of those games that they play afterwards, they lose. Not that that means anything. It just means that the division isn't very good. And if the Lions can beat all the good teams in that division is not scaring us going into the playoffs. So yes, I would say that is the worst division in the NFL.
Jeffrey, what? Oh, and do you think that? What are your thoughts about Todd Bowles there, Joe? Do you think he's is his seat getting a little hot there down in Tampa?
No, because Tampa Bay wasn't predicted to do very much this season. And if they have a 500 record, he'll have his job for another year. While they do a little bit of rebuilding after the Tom Brady era in Tampa.
Very nice, Jeffrey. What are your thoughts here?
I am definitely buying this. They are by far the worst division by record and by the eye test. Every time I see any of these games with these teams, it's always hard to watch. I am a Bakers fan.
Is it because they all suck, like my father said here?
Yes, I would tend to agree. I think the unit that of all those teams, the unit that's probably the spiciest is the Saints defense, but everything else has just been a slog for them.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I'm going to buy as well that this is the worst division in football, just because there's not one of these teams that really seems to have like a clear vision for the future, right? Like nobody has a really exciting QB. Obviously, the Panthers took Bryce Young, and they're hoping that he could be that guy, but he really hasn't looked. He hasn't looked as good as C.J. Stroud by any means in his first season here. So it's one of those things where there's not really a QB head coach combo that really looks like they could become the dominant force in this division. And it seems like it's a great time really for almost all four teams to enter that rebuild phase. And whoever's going to be able to do that the quickest and the most efficiently could become the team to really claim the NFC South moving forward. But right now, there's not like a front runner that you look at and say, yeah, these guys are going to be the best team down there. So I'll buy. There's really kind of directionless down there.
They did Baker dirty. I agree with your dad. He threw a perfect Hail Mary pass, landed in the middle of three groups of people, and no one even looked at it.
Baker, to his credit, is doing everything he can. He is having a great season, especially for a QB that has been forced to move so much to just different teams. He's come in there and really played really well. And so, you would think after losing Tom Brady that the QB play would be the weakness of that team. And Baker's come in there and played great. So I definitely don't think he is the cause for concern there. My dad thinks the Saints, though, maybe that they'll be fine. I don't know. Not liking what I've been seeing. I mean, Derek Carr he's been okay. He's not great. The Raiders let him go for a reason. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah. Next up, speaking of NFC South teams, the Falcons. Of course, one other running back was taken in the first round besides Jahmyr Gibbs, and that was Bijan Robinson. At the beginning of the year, they were using him effectively. He was getting quite a few yards, but of late here, they've been keeping him on the bench. And are you buying or selling the fact that the Falcons' use of him doesn't justify selecting him in the first round? And the sort of sub question there is their head coach Arthur Smith? Should he be a candidate on our hot spot list? Jeff, let's start with you.
I am buying this. Arthur Smith is an absolute menace, not using the talent that he has. I mean, the best thing he had going for him when he was the offensive coordinator in Tennessee was using his best players. A.J. Brown when they had him, Derrick Henry feeding the ball like 300 times this season. But when you have all these good players like Kyle Pitts, a supposed generational talent at running back, which we don't get too often anymore, and Bijan Robinson, your GM takes him in the first round. You got to use him because when he gets the ball, he produces. When Kyle Pitts gets schemed in to get some plays, he produces. But I'm not sure exactly what Arthur Smith's doing. He did shave his mustache this week in hopes to limit the turnovers, but I don't think that's going to save that.
Do you think he's a good candidate for our hot butts list?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Joe, what are your thoughts here? Are you buying or selling the first part about Bijan? And then do you think Arthur Smith should be added to the list?
Yeah, this is a buy for me. It's always tough to get the rookies involved as much as you want to get them involved in their first year. But still, nonetheless, I think that, for drafting him that high and as the number, I think the number one running back drafted, he should be used like a workhorse or as much as possible. And, Arthur Smith being on the hot butts list, yeah, I think he should be there. Just based upon some of the performances that I've seen with him coaching, he doesn't seem to know the situation of the game and the effective play call or the effective coach management of how to manage the football game from what I've seen. And I haven't seen very much action with Atlanta, but still from what I have seen, I just don't see him making the best coaching decisions. And so this is a buy for me, and yeah, he's on the list.
It seems to be a lot of agreement from our fans here. My dad, referring to Arthur Smith here, says, "Yeah, he sucks." And then Edward buying and asking, "What are they doing?" It's. I wish we had good answers for you about what they were doing down there in Atlanta, but they who really knows? I'm not even sure Atlanta knows all the time. Speaking of questionable decision making, gentlemen, the Cardinals felt that they had Clayton Tune and that he gave him a better option to win games than Joshua Dobbs. But right here, I have it laid out that Joshua Dobbs is a better option at quarterback than Clayton Tune. Obviously, it's only been one game since the trade went down. The Vikings got that 31-28 win against the Falcons, whereas the Cardinals weren't able to score any points against that Browns defense, losing that game 27-0. Small sample size, and obviously there's another half of the season to play, but are you buying or selling the fact that Joshua Dobbs is a better option at QB than the rookie Clayton Tune? Joe, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think Joshua Dobbs is not a half bad quarterback. He's more of a glass half full quarterback in the NFL, and if your quarterback goes down, he's a good one to put in there. I've seen him play a little bit earlier on this season for Arizona, and he's played well enough to win football games there. So when he got traded, where he is now, he's still winning football games. So he's proven that he can win football games in the NFL, and Clayton Tune, fairly unproven, and has a lot of work to do to get to the point to where he's winning football games.
Absolutely. Jeff, what are your thoughts here?
Absolutely. I think Josh Dobbs is a good quarterback. I mean, he can come in like 3 days before they're ready to play, put him out on the field. He wasn't even supposed to play, but then Jaron Hall got that injury, and he doesn't even know most of these guys' names, but he led the Vikings to victory. And this is not the first time he's come in on short notice, learning the playbook as it was going on. Kevin O'Connell was basically describing plays to him as it was going on before the mic gets cut off in his helmet. I think he's an excellent processor, and I think he's a big what if to me. Like, what if he had a good coaching staff around him and some stability? I mean, he could potentially be above average quarterback or even a decent starter for this league.
Well, yeah, and we have Edward pointing out here that Dobbs all day being in a bad system in Arizona never used his full max potential, like you were saying there, Jeffrey. So what could he be? What would his ceiling look like if he was in the right place? My father chiming in with it's really just an interesting situation for the Cardinals at the quarterback. As my dad points out, they're probably going to move on from Kyler Murray. Let's see what he says here. And then he points out, of course, Baker did the same thing last year when he got sent to LA and took over for that game where Stafford was injured, which is impressive. The fact that in back-to-back seasons, we've had QBs step up, being traded to a new team and just coming in and balling out in their first action is interesting. Hopefully it goes better for Dobbs. Well, as far as the Lions are concerned, hopefully it actually is more like what happens with Baker Mayfield than he goes on to have a lot of success, because we don't want to see the Vikings. The Vikings can be okay, but we don't want them challenging us for the throne in the NFC North. But we'll have to see there, because it was interesting. Baker had that hot start where he came in and led the team to an emotional victory, and then sort of dropped off. And then, of course, my dad throwing some shade your way, Jeffrey. Hell no, Dobbs is not that good.
We'll see. It makes Minnesota a little spicier over in our division.
It's a little bit of a cut. We thought it would be easy. We thought Captain Kirk was down with that ACL, and then that was the end of it. And then, I think it was his Achilles. And then here they are, still winning games. The last question here in our buy or sell is that QB Smith is the factor that limits the potential for Seattle. You look at all the weapons they have on offense. They haven't really gotten things going this year. Last year, I think their offense was working a little bit better, but are you buying or selling the fact that Geno Smith is that factor that is causing the Seahawks to not quite live up to the potential they could be? Jeff, let's start with you here on this one.
I am buying this. I think Geno Smith's an all right quarterback, but he's not about to go out and elevate everybody around him, take control of the game like the elite quarterbacks. Now, they have a good run game and a solid defense, but when push comes to shove, I mean, you need to have good quarterback play in this league, and I think he has a ceiling, and we're seeing that ceiling right now.
Joe, what are your thoughts?
It's a sell for me. I think Geno Smith is a quality starter, one of the better starting quarterbacks in the league right now. And I don't think he limits the potential for Seattle. I think he's a playmaker. And I think that what I've seen against him playing against Detroit, he's been able to put together complete football games in passing and running. And, going back to what we talked about with Dobbs and Lamar Jackson and Geno Smith, these are mobile quarterbacks that also have an arm that can pass the football. So we've seen all three of those quarterbacks have good games against Detroit, which is reason to be concerned, especially for Dobbs, talking about the last buy or sell. But the QB Geno Smith is not limiting Seattle. I think it has to deal with the overall team chemistry and team unity, and especially after getting the hype knocked out of them from Baltimore. So they got a little bit of a turnaround to do, but they'll be in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it parallels a lot with what we saw with the Lions. I think Baltimore's a really good team, and I think having to go play them in Baltimore is a difficult task. The Ravens did the same thing to them that they essentially did to us, where they took away the things they were good at and forced them to play a different style of game than they like to play, and they got dominated in the trenches. And so, I think Seahawks fans should feel similar to how the Lions fans felt when we had our 38-6 loss to them. It's not the end of the road, but I think it does, it shows a recipe for how other teams can beat them. If you beat them in the trenches, you force them to play a style of football that they don't want to play. Really, that's how you can beat any team. That's football 101. Those are the things you want to do to your opponent. So the Ravens just happen to be a team right now that is able to do that. And the Seahawks are the latest team to feel that sting. So my dad says he's an older Dobbs, starting things out with. We had Edward chiming in with a sell, get him out of the pocket and use that dual threat ability that you were talking about there, Joe. And then we have the Joe, stop it. Geno sucks. Detroit played like Detroit against them. Detroit's defense is not that good. There's
my
that
face
Lions
says it all.
There's that Lions hate we've been missing, but it's good to have it back in chat. So we talked a little bit about some names that we'll be adding to our hot butts here. They're not in the list currently, but just to run through the guys that are here now, and we'll be adding more based off our discussions this week. We have, of course, Josh McDaniels, who's the first casualty of the list. The Raiders getting their first win with him gone. That's already moved on to the next era, and let's see. What do we have here? Son, what are you saying about the smack Detroit face? They run away like little kitties. Ugh.
Bless you.
Kitties.
I
Bless you,
disagree with
Joe.
that because after both of our losses, we came back and win by
That's true.
multiple touchdowns.
Well, you tell him, Jeffrey. You tell him. Bless you, Joe. So we have Josh McDaniels, of course. Let's see. We have Matt Eberflus. Ron Rivera is still there. Bless you, Joe. We have Brian Dable. And now this one's really interesting because this could be, especially with the injury to Daniel Jones and him being out the remainder of the season. Obviously, he had just signed that $40 million contract, but there could be a big regime change coming to New York in terms of what's going on with the Giants. And Brian Daboll will be could very well be part of that. Of course, Bill Belichick, but I think he'll have a little more say. But again, I think we're all thinking that this may be the year that he finally moves on from the Patriots. And Mike Vrabel could be the guy that Kraft looks to replace him with if things don't go well for him in Tennessee. I think he is, obviously he's, played for the Patriots. He's familiar with Bill Belichick and, part of those successful years with the Patriots. But I think he's different enough from Bill Belichick. He doesn't try and do things the Patriots way per se. He reminds me more of like a Dan Campbell-esque coach, where I think that he could be, if the Titans let him go, he could be an interesting pick to replace him in New England. And then, of course, Frank Reich. The Panthers do have do they have one win or do they have 2 wins? They have 1 win. So they do have that 1 win on the season. Things haven't been going really great with Bryce, but we'll have to see how things go. My dad thinking that Jared Mayo will be taking over in New England.
I've heard rumblings about that as well.
That is spicy. I like that. And then Edward chiming in that Bill's gone. We've been saying it all season, and he's sticking to it. And then, of course, last but not least, we have Brandon Staley, who, unfortunately for him, the Lions will be playing and maybe helping to escort him out of the building by giving the Chargers a loss, hopefully on Sunday. But those are the names. Of course, we'll be adding in Arthur Smith as well as Sean McDermott to the list as names to watch out for. But those are currently who we're tracking in our hot butts, and we'll continue to update that throughout the season. In terms of the King of the North standings, the Lions are still your first place team. They're still holding on to the crown. The only team really of note to watch out for are those Minnesota Vikings, who are on a 4-game winning streak. Of course, we don't play them until we play them twice in the last 3 weeks of the season. So that's it's going to be interesting to see how things work out. Potentially, we could claim the NFC North before we even play them. But we do play them late in the season. So going to be interesting to see what happens there. And then, of course, last week we were on a bye. And really the most interesting thing that happened was, of course, Seattle's loss to Baltimore. So that kept us the number 2 seed, because had the Seahawks won, they would have become the number 2 seed with the head-to-head victory and the tiebreaker over us. So Lions are still currently your number 2 seed in the NFC North. In the NFC. In general. Before we jump into the game day storylines for our upcoming game against the Chargers, Joe mentioned our secret segment for today, and we're going to do some Lions midseason awards. So we'll go through and sort of rapid fire our picks for who's been our MVP, who's been our top offensive player, who's been our top defensive player, who's been the standout rookie, who's been the most improved player, and then what the best play of the season so far has been. And so, gentlemen, we'll get started here with our MVP picks. I'm going to fall into the cliche of choosing a quarterback as my MVP, and I am going to go with Mr. Jared Goff as my MVP pick. Joe, who do you have as your MVP halfway through the season?
Jared Goff.
Jeff, who do you have?
I also have Jared Goff. He's leading a very efficient, very good Lions offense, and he's bringing this all together.
Oh, my dad's saying nope. The offensive line.
That's like 5 people.
It's fun. Well, it's more than that because they haven't all been healthy. But we're now moving on to our top offensive player, And my top of the year so far is Mr. Penny Sewell. He has been in there all season long, and he has been playing fantastic. Penny Sewell is my top offensive player of the year. Who do you get? Joe, who do you have as your top offensive player?
For top offensive player of the year, I'm going to have to go with the offensive line.
You're going the whole line. I like it. Jeffrey, who do you have as your top offensive player?
I'm absolutely going with Penei Sewell. He is one of the best offensive linemen in the league, and every week, despite our outcome, he is absolutely handling his assignments.
He was actually almost my MVP for Detroit was Penei Sewell.
He's playing really well. The nice thing is that he is, when we drafted him, we drafted him to be that like premier left tackle in the NFL, to be a guy who was going to be on this offensive line and be good for decades, or however long he plays the game. Playing 2 decades is kind of 20 years in the NFL would be hard, but for a decade plus, hopefully. And he's living up to that hype so far. So it's great to see, and hopefully he can continue to do that, because so far it's been a great season for him. And I like how my dad went from "you all suck" to "without them you suck" to choosing David Montgomery as his top offensive player, who is a guy who definitely relies. Well, I guess if he's choosing the offensive line as his MVP and then David Montgomery as his top offensive player, I guess that makes sense. I'm following.
I like that.
He's
David
missed
Montgomery
too many games.
That was the thing in my book that hurt me, is the fact that he has missed a couple games. Otherwise, I think he would be my pick as well. But it's going to be good to have him back here. Now we're moving on to our top defensive players. I'm going to go with Aiden Hutchinson. Similar to Penei Sewell, we drafted him to make a difference maker on this defense, to be our top pass rusher. And so far this season, he's living up to the hype. So I'm going Aiden Hutchinson. Joe, who's your top defensive player of the year so far?
I'm going to have to go with Alex Anzalone.
Not a bad pick at all. Jeffrey, who do you have?
I'm also going with Alex Anzalone. A lot of people clowned on us for signing him to that extension, but he's absolutely lived up to the hype and is playing much above his perceived station in the NFL.
Now, this is a question for you both, especially since, just because you chose Alex Anzalone. I saw some reports out there that he is, he's expecting the birth of his second child, and that may conflict with the Green Bay Packers game. He's already come out and said that he would miss that game if that's indeed the case, so that he can be there for the birth of his second child. Just what are your guys' thoughts about that as fans? Obviously, it's the birth of a child. It's a big deal. I'm fine with it, but just curious about what you guys think about that, about, him potentially missing that game against the Packers to be there for the birth of his child. Joe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's no substitute for family. Family is more important than anything. And this is his family life. He needs, if he wants to take the game off and be with there for the birth of his child, then most certainly that's what he should do, because family is number one.
Great point. I like Edward's point here. No worries. Roll out the second string. It's the new Packers. LOL. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts there?
I absolutely agree. That's a huge life event, having the birth of your child, and some things are bigger than football and your job. So go there and be there with your wife.
Very good. All right, now our standout rookies. We're spoiled for options. I think there's 3 players really you could choose from. I'm going with Sam Laporta, though, just because when I look back at Lions history and I think about all of the rookie tight ends we've had, and the hype around them, Sam Laporta wasn't nearly as hyped up as much, but has delivered far beyond any of those other tight ends that we've drafted early in the draft. So, just because of that history in Detroit of disappointing tight end performance, I'm going Sam Laporta, just because it's a breath of fresh air to see a rookie tight end come in and actually contribute for this team. Joe, who do you have as your standout rookie through the first half of the season?
It's between Laporta and Gibbs, and I'm going to have to go with Sam Laporta. He's got more touchdowns, and he's been more reliable on the offensive end for completing third downs and making big plays.
Fantastic. Jeffrey, who's your pick?
Sam Laporta, absolutely, with as far as production goes. I know Gibbs is coming on, but he's been hurt, and they're trying to get him in there into the offense slowly. As of right now, Laporta is absolutely stepping up. And then also shout out to Brian Branch.
Brian Branch was almost who I went with. He did miss a game because of injury, but I feel like, especially with CJ Johnson Gardner out, a lot of that swag that's come to that secondary is because of Brian Branch. And I think he does add add an element of just nastiness, some toughness to that secondary. So he was pretty close to being my pick for standout rookie. But again, just considering all of the other rookie tight ends who have not lived up to the hype, Sam Laporta being this good has been it's been nice. Our most improved player picks. I went with Jerry Jacobs, the cornerback. Obviously, currently he leads the Lions in interceptions, and he wasn't necessarily expected to be a starter for this team. You know, they brought in Manuel Mosley. They made some other changes in that secondary. But he's really stepped up when he's been forced into action because of injury. And, he went from, I think at one point he was getting like death threats and had to like turn off or mute his social media to now leading the Lions in interceptions. So even over the course of just this year, from the first couple of games of action to where we are now, he's improved drastically. So Jerry Jacobs is my pick. Joe, who's your most improved Lion?
Same thing, Jerry Jacobs. But real quick, when you said we were doing this segment where we were choosing our MVP, offensive player, and rookie and all that, I did the for the NFL.
So did I.
I should have.
So let me share that real quick.
Yeah.
MVP has to go to Tua Tagovailoa. The offensive player of the year goes to Raheem Mostert. Defensive player of the year goes to Kenneth Moore. He's got 2 touchdowns on defense and 3 interceptions.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, the rookie of the year so far on offense is Sam Laporta and the Jerry Jacobs on defense for most improved.
Very nice. Jeff, who did you have as your most improved player? And then if you want to read off your picks for the NFL for these positions, by all means.
Yeah, I also put Jerry Jacobs down. Having a really down year, death threats, that's just unacceptable. Don't do that as a fan. But he's actually coming out here and playing much better than last year. When it comes to the NFL, my current picks, MVP, Lamar Jackson, top offensive player. I am split between Tyreek Hill and Christian McCaffrey. Top defensive player, Myles Garrett. Standout rookie, Sam Laporta. Give the Lions a bump there, too. Most improved player, I got to give to DeMar Hamlin. Guy almost died on the field, and now he's playing snaps in the NFL. That's an incredible comeback. And the best play is Garrett Wilson's Week 1 touchdown catch from Zach Wilson. He tipped it back to himself while falling it backwards.
That was a spectacular play. I do recall that. That was
for my best play. For my best play, it'd have to be in Green Bay or in Kansas City. When we're 5+ yards out from the end zone and we're running the football into the end zone. Those are the best plays in the NFL, when you can run the football in from 5 yards out of the goal line and run it into the end zone. Those are the best plays I've ever seen in football.
Very nice. My pick for, and this is Lions specific, and just because I think it set the tone, I think, for what we've been able to do. Brian Branch's pick 6 against Kansas City. Him taking that back. Obviously, getting an interception off of Patrick Mahomes isn't an easy thing to do, and just the way that helped turn the momentum in that game. I think it really has not only helped build the building blocks for us getting that win against Kansas City, but really has helped propel us to this great start that they've had. And so, yeah, I'm going that Brian Branch pick 6 against the Chiefs. And then I guess if I was to expand this to the NFL, I think my MVP pick, I think I'd be in the same position with you there, with Jeffrey, with the Lamar Jackson as my MVP. My top offensive player, I think I would go with Tyreek Hill. My top defensive player, that one's a little tougher. I like what TJ Watt's been doing for the Steelers. I think he's the only reason that they're relevant as a team. My standout rookie, if we're going opening up, would be CJ Stroud, just because, again, I think he's been the best of this rookie batch of QBs. And then my most improved player overall, Ooh, that's a tough one. I think I would go. It's hard to say most improved player, but I would say Adam Thielen down there with the Panthers. I think a lot of people thought that, when he was dealt from the Vikings, that he was sort of towards the down part of his career, and that he didn't have a whole lot left in the tank. And he's sort of been their number one wide receiver and shown that he has plenty left in the tank. So I
Oh, that's
don't
good.
I don't know if it's necessarily most improved player, but I think he was a guy that a lot of people thought was done, but is showing that he can still get things done in the NFL. All right. So those are our midseason awards. We'll have to see how things change as we go through the second half of the season, but a lot of good things. And now we of course kick off the start of the second half of the season, traveling to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers. The overall series between the Lions and the Chargers has consisted of 12 games. The Chargers lead the all-time series 7-5, but the Lions did win the last game 13-10, and that was played back in 2019. Dan Campbell has said that all three big starters who've been on the injury report, David Montgomery, Frank Ragnow, and Jonah Jackson, should all be back in action this weekend against the Chargers. I saw a quote from him today saying that this is the healthiest that the team has been all year. So looking forward to seeing that. And I think the thing to really watch out for, we talked about potentially the best way to beat this Lions team is to apply pressure to Jared Goff, to take him out of his comfort zone and make him force him into making bad plays with the ball. The Chargers don't generate a ton of pass rush. They only have generated 102 pressures so far this season, which is 26th in the NFL. But they have had 31 sacks on those 102 pressures, which is second in the NFL. So they're 26th in the amount of pressures, but second in sacks. Last week, they only had 12 pressures, but 8 of them ended in sacks. So they don't often get after the quarterback, but when they do, they get home. That's something I think to watch out for in this game. Of course, having a healthy offensive line back is going to be fantastic and hopefully can keep Jared Goff out of trouble. But is there anything about this Chargers team, gentlemen, that has you worried as we travel out to Los Angeles to play them this Sunday? Joe, what are your thoughts?
Khalil Mack had a game in which he almost set the single game sack record. So we got to make sure he doesn't go off and have a big game against us. So watch out for that. They got a lot of players. Derwin James, Joey Bosa. I don't know if any of those guys are going to be playing, but they got some really high class players. Not high class, but really talented players.
Mhm.
And on defense, they got playmakers, so Lions are going to have to play a tough defense. One of the tougher defenses they played all season. You look at the Madden ratings, you look at how San Diego is in Madden, and they have one of the best defenses that is in the game.
Very much so. And Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here?
I think I have two kind of keys here. I think it's going to be a good test for our defense. I know the Chargers have been struggling on offense, but they have the pieces there to be a really good offense. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how we play against them coming off the bye week. And also, I think David Montgomery coming back really changes our red zone offense because we're one of the run heaviest teams in the red zone, kind of what Joe was talking about. From that 5, even 10 yards out, David Montgomery plus that offensive line is almost free touchdowns. So it's going to be exciting to kind of see what they do with that power running game with him back, seeing how they mix Gibbs in there. I think it's going to be a good game.
Definitely, I think this is going to be a very good game. The Lions are only favored by 3 points, which means they are expecting it to be a very tight game. The over-under is 48.5, and then the money line is minus 160 for the Lions, plus 135 for the Chargers. Vegas has it being I shouldn't say Vegas because it's not just Vegas for sports betting anymore. The sports betting world has it being a very tight game. And I think to Joe's point, you look at the stars on the defensive side of the football, plenty of people to worry about on that Chargers defense. I shouldn't say the nice thing because he's injured, but Mike Williams not being out there certainly helps from an offensive perspective. Us not having to keep track of both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. So far we haven't seen Quentin Johnson, the draft pick out of TCU. He hasn't really quite made an impact yet. And of course, you still have to worry about Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly there in the backfield. Also, you have Justin Herbert, who has that injury to his middle finger on his non-throwing hand that's been sort of an ongoing thing. But, I definitely think this is a game where the Lions do need to be careful. The Chargers are not an easy team to beat. They are 4-4, so their record isn't the greatest. But this is definitely, I think, a chance for the Lions again to come out here and really make a statement. They're the healthiest they've been since the beginning of the season. They really need to come out here. And Jeffrey, to your point, one of the things that I'm going to be looking for out of them is to see a improved red zone offense, because they haven't looked really good in the last couple of weeks. So since they've had the bye week, they've gotten healthier. They're getting David Montgomery back. Hopefully expecting to see a more efficient, more productive red zone offense out of the Lions, because they're going to need it in order to beat this Chargers team. My dad's saying that the that Detroit will lose, and many dots bad. Saying, Joe, stop it. They ain't that good. Edward is predicting a letdown week. He's seeing a hangover game. He's taking the Chargers 20-17. Thinking the offense struggles and Jared Goff running for his life. Lots of blitzes with little time to throw. Running game might not be there. He sees a week of struggles out west. And of course, my dad loving that. Very true, Edward. And then I'm not sure what he will this week. I'm not sure what that is in reference to. It might be in reference to Khalil Mack setting that single game record for sacks. But I think
he just had a senior moment. Just typing things.
It's 100% possible. I'm not gonna deny it as a possibility. But that leads us, gentlemen, to our pick'em picks. Who are you gonna lock in? Of course, we're all sitting at 6-2. For the most part, me and Jeffrey, I think we've been in lockstep throughout the season. Joe got a little spicy with his picks, but it's all worked out to the fact that we're still all just tied at 6-2. So no real difference here. I'll start off with my selection. I'm going to go with the Lions in this one. Again, I'm hoping that they come out just like they did against the Chiefs, who are another good team from the AFC West, and make a statement that, hey, we're healthy. We had a week to gather ourselves, and we're ready to keep moving this forward. So I'm going with the Lions to win in Los Angeles. Joe, who is your pick for this week?
I'm going to go with the Lions Grid fan base and have to choose the Chargers.
Giving into the haterade. All right. All right. Joe, Jeff, who's your pick?
That at some point I'm going to have to hedge my bets here, and I was strongly considering taking the Chargers, but with all the haterade going on, I have to go with my boys in blue, going with Detroit again.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. This is certainly a game. We've talked about it. They could lose because the Chargers are a good team. My dad going Joe wins, of course, with the lock in there for the Chargers. Between this game against the Chargers and the game against the Cowboys, I think this Chargers game may be the next to that game against the Cowboys, could be the most difficult game left on their schedule. So certainly an opportunity here for the Lions to come out and show what they're made of against a strong team. So
the Vikings are going to be tough.
The Vikings will be tough. I think I was hoping we could write them off without Kirk Cousins as QB, but Josh Dobbs, can't count him out.
The Pastronaut.
That's right. He is a literal rocket scientist. That's what he brings to the table. All right. Well, thank you, everybody who tuned in today and contributed to the Lions Grid. Of course, Edward, my dad, we always appreciate your guys' commentary. And we're always coming to you live on Thursdays at 7:30. With one exception, of course, that'll be our Thanksgiving Day show, our Thanksgiving week show, The game is actually played on Thursday, so we'll be moving that episode to Tuesday. Of course, we still have a couple weeks left before that, but we'll make sure to let you know. Again, Tuesday will be the day of the Thanksgiving week show as they take on the Packers. Yeah, otherwise, 7:30 Thursdays, you can catch us here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. Make sure you like the Lions Grid profile, and you'll be kept up to date with all our latest go lives and everything like that. Jeffrey, I like the flex there with the Lions.
I tried to get it in there.
looking good. Is that the custom Raymond jersey?
It is. It is.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, we hopefully will be able to celebrate a Lions victory as we do our Week 11 show next week. But until then, I'm Kevin Marhine. Thank you, Joe and Jeff, for joining me as always. Appreciate it. And we'll catch you all during our next episode. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.